Our moderator for this session is Bimla Wade, assisted by Shaina Malalu. At this time, I would encourage you to put yourselves on mute. If you would like to say hello, please feel free to use the chat feature on the Zoom toolbar, which you should see when you're logging on from your phone, laptop, or your tablet. Your mute button is a toggle feature activated through the microphone button, which is located at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. We encourage you to keep yourself on mute throughout the call. But if you'd like a question, of course, type it in the chat and our moderator will be happy to read it out at the end of the session. Zoom usually has three different views, namely the speaker view, the gallery view, and the full screen presentation view. On a phone, you can simply switch views by swiping your screen to the left with your finger. But on your laptop and your tablet, you will see more options like maximizing or minimizing the book and the presentation taking place. Okay, so I'd like to welcome all of you. I know some of you are joining from different parts of the world. And from wherever you're joining, I just want to wish you a wonderful time today. And you're going to have such interesting conversation. Now, this book study is the first of a 4-part series, with each session taking place at 11 a.m. EST on Saturdays, starting June the 13th, that's today, and lasting for an hour. Of course, we prefer if you attend all 4 sessions, but we understand if you can only make a few. The Eventbrite link has been set up so that you need to individually register for each one of the 4 sessions if you plan on attending the entire study. Please find the Eventbrite link in the chat. Okay, we will also post the link to purchase the book, which we greatly encourage you to do so. It's, I think, on Amazon just about $2.99 Canadian, and it's about $2.19 on Amazon.com. This is the book. I have it in my hand. It's a very, very interesting read. And this session, of course, is being recorded. Let's get now down to our main presenter. Robin Arthur is a newspaper editor and a columnist who won the Pan Asia Journalism Award in 1995. One of his books, which is called Can the Poor Inherit the Earth? Haven't read that one. I need to read that. Won acclaim from UN organizations, including UNESCO and UNDP. In Canada, Arthur worked very hard to develop an appreciation of interfaith dialogue. Between 2011 and 2016, he convened 3 very successfully staged spiritual diversity conferences, paving the way for an establishment of an interfaith council in the city of Halifax. Arthur lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia, with his wife, Teresa. He's the main star of our show today, of course. Please help me welcome Robin Arthur to present a study on his most recent book, Science and the God Elusion. Take it away, Robin.
Oh, thank you, Glynis. Thank you very much. Good morning, friends and guests. We're all set to start, however, in the tradition of people of all faiths, we would like to begin with a 1-minute silent prayer of contemplation, seeking guidance and blessings from the Creator or from your own inspirational or spiritual sources. Please contemplate for a moment. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can't see anything now, except myself.
That's good.
All right. Right. Let's begin. And upside to COVID-19, I think, is that it has made everyone look at life from a new lens. The lockdown may have been a testing time from a social, spiritual, and economic point of view, but the regulation was necessary to contain the virus. In any case, however, thanks to technology, the world can keep in touch with itself, and that's what I believe we're doing today. Uh, can all of you hear me? Give me a thumbs up to say yes. Okay, okay. I get it. I guess you can. Well, I remember the time when a preacher chose to ask the same question of his congregation just before he began his homily. Can you hear me? He said. There was a moment's silence, and then someone seated at the rear pew raised his hand and said, "Well, preacher, I can hear you very well, but I really wouldn't mind exchanging my seat with somebody who cannot." Okay, that was a nice break. I just thought that was funny. And so let's now get down to work on Science and the God Elusion, a book I launched in June of 2019. It was brought out specifically to call the bluff of the modern atheist at the altar of science. I don't want to be your prophet of doom, but take a look at the new books hitting the stands today. There is this book written by Dan Brown, brilliantly crafted, that propounds a theory on the most profound question man has ever asked: where have I come from and where am I going? It's presented in the guise of fiction, but itchy ears tend to think of that as the truth. A prominent physicist, on the other hand, Lawrence Krauss, was some time ago pushing his theory that the universe actually could have come from nothing. Well, at least that was what atheist Richard Dawkins told a gathering of friends at a debate with the former Cardinal, Australian Cardinal George Pell. And now another author, historian previously unknown, Yuval Hariri, is making history with scientific predictions. He tells you in a very sanguine way that science will put an end to death. Make of it what you will, but it is precisely all this that my book, Science and the God Elusion, seeks to challenge. Today, let's look at the first 3 chapters, but before that, I just want to share an epigram from Anthony de Mello's book, The Heart of the Enlightened, reproduced by permission in Science and the God Elusion. This is how it's narrated. Tommy had just got back from the beach. "Were there other children there?" asked his mother. "Yes," said Tommy. "Boys or girls?" she asked. "How would I know?" Tommy said. They didn't have their clothes on." All right. De Mello then commenced. "They see not what is there, but see instead what they have been trained to see." So chapter 1 looks at Darwin's influential book, The Origin of Species. My sense is that the theory of evolution in interpretation stretched itself out to argue the fact that organisms evolving from elemental atoms and instructed by a self-creating universe of natural laws can actually flash into living tissues to create human beings like you and me. This, in irreverent silence, was an attempt by the scientific world then to ignore the first cause argument, which is one that infers from causal logic a self-creator as the cause of the universe. Now, what the average observer, fed with these scientific notions, does not probably know is that Darwin ultimately admitted in his subsequent editions, in the subsequent editions of his book, that all forms of organic being that have lived on this planet have at some point or the other descended from some primordial form or forms into which life was first breathed by the Creator. So Darwin actually acknowledged the first cause. With that as an introduction, the chapter then carries a quick run through the early history of atheist thought, starting with Diagoras of Melos in the 5th century BC, followed by Aristotle and Epicurus in the 3rd century BC, and then leading up to Copernicus and Epicurus, who in the 15th century essentially laid the groundwork for a keener understanding of the universe and possibly a secular conception of its mystery. In the 17th and 18th centuries, deism emerged in influential circles. Now, what is deism? Deism takes the position that God exists as a first cause, that God is the creator of the universe, but does not interfere directly in human affairs. That new thinking actually opened the way for 19th century free thought and liberal movements. In the 19th century, German atheist Karl Marx pushed the envelope further when he pronounced religion as the opiate of the people. Friedrich Nietzsche then coined the aphorism, God is dead. Finally, the 20th century saw the emergence of atheist despots, Mao Zedong, Stalin, and Pol Pot, whose hostility to Christianity and Judaism saw brutal hostilities inflicted on their people. The most prominent among modern atheists, Professor Richard Dawkins, who vigorously defends his argument that there is definitely no God, describes the evolution process as one that can be compared to a blind watchmaker. He argues that reproduction of an organism, its mutation and selection occur independent of a designer, independent of a creator. But that does not, again, explain how life began. Einstein stood aside from secular scientists, declaring that what separates him from the community of intellectuals is utter humility toward the mysteries of the universe. He said that his response to the mysterious force that moves the constellations has been one of awe. Let me read you a quote. My religiosity consists in a humble admiration of the infinitely superior spirit that reveals itself in the little that we, with our weak and transitory understanding, can comprehend reality. You may want to contemplate on that. Chapter 2 addresses the question, what does science know about the origins of the universe? Science takes a dramatic turn in the 50s with Edwin Hubble's postulation of an expanding universe, riveting the ears of scientists to the possibility that creation began at a single moment with the Big Bang. The scientist Francis Collins describes it in his book, The Language of God, and which has been reproduced with permission in Science and the God Elusion. Let me read you an excerpt. Using the Doppler effect, the same principle that allows the state police to determine the speed of your car as you pass by their radar equipment, or that causes the whistle of an oncoming train to have a higher pitch than after you had passed it, Hubble found that everywhere he looked, the light in the galaxy suggested that they were receding from us. The farther away they went, the faster the galaxies were receding. Collins then explains, if everything in the universe is flying apart, reversing the arrow of time would predict that at some point all of these galaxies were together in one incredibly massive entity. Hubble's observations started a deluge of experimental measurements that over the last 70 years have led to the conclusion that the vast majority of physicists and cosmologists that the universe began at a single moment, commonly now referred to as the Big Bang. Let's simplify this. What is the Big Bang? The Big Bang tells you that planets 14 billion years ago shot out of that ball of powerful energy. Then after eons of time, the temperatures, cooled down to form simple atoms, and then chemicals floating across the universe coalesced, forming amino acids to create organisms in a primordial ocean from which people like you and I were formed. You and me were formed. The narrative forces the conclusion that the theory is ridden with serendipity, and the observer therefore demands a metaphysical or a divine explanation to what sounds like a chain loop of mysteries. Sir Fred Hoyle, an English astronomer who rejected the Big Bang theory, had observed the notion that not only the biopolymer, but the operating program of a living cell could be arrived at chance in a primordial organic soup is evidently nonsense of a high order. Hoyle was drawn to the conclusion that a super intellect had monkeyed with physics, chemistry, and biology, and declared that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. So you see, there are profound questions that are mysteries even today. How plausible, for example, is it that chemicals in the universe would self-assemble to start the process of life? How do the atoms of carbons and hydrogen or oxygen floating in our heads think up a theorem? Why do we have a universe at all when we could have nothing at all? What breeds life into the equations of physics? What caused life? So how did life evolve? Dr. Gerhard Schroeder, reputed scientist and author of The Hidden Face of God, addresses that question. He writes, not through random reactions over billions of years in energy-rich ponds, thermal or otherwise. The fossil record has laid waste to that false assumption. Okay, lastly, folks, chapter 3 takes a closer look at Darwin's Origin of Species. In 1959, he declared that all species of life have descended over time from some common ancestors. Darwin set out his theory of evolution by natural selection as an explanation for adaptation and speciation, and defined natural selection as the principle by which each slight variation of a trait within a species, if useful, can be preserved or is preserved. He said that led to an improvement in the species and an advance in organization. Well, natural selection is now quite clearly one of the cornerstones of modern biology. That being said, the curious question lingers: how convincing is Darwin's theory as an argument on the origins of life? In his chapter on instinct, Darwin refers to the three most wonderful of all known instincts. He points to the instinct which leads the cuckoo to lay her eggs in other birds' nests, the slavish instincts of certain ants, and the comb-making power of the hive-bee to demonstrate how instincts in a state of nature have become modified by selection. But he also slips in a line of caution on instinct. I must premise, he says, that I have nothing to do with the origin of the primary mental powers, any more than I have with that of life itself. We are concerned only with the diversities of instinct and of the other mental qualities of animals within the same class. In short, Darwin steers away from the conversation about the origin of life itself. But he ends his book with religious language, as when he says, there is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed by the Creator into few forms or into one. Let me repeat, Darwin did actually admit in subsequent editions that life was breathed into a cell, and the common observer, I'm afraid, doesn't know that fact. To sum up, Darwin's origin does not investigate the origin of life, but confines itself to the question of how modern species developed. So that ends my talk for today. And ladies and gentlemen, it's now Q&A time, and we can now take questions. But before that, I want to introduce you to my friend, Stephen Webner, who wrote the foreword to my book, Science and the God Elusion, and to whom I turn to for clarity in the pursuit of separating scientific truth from scientific investigation. Oh, sorry, let me say that again. To whom I turn to for clarity in the pursuit of separating scientific truth from scientific imagination. Professor Wepner is a physicist at a liberal arts college, Eckerd in Florida, and is active in research which involves the theory of smashing atoms together using quantum mechanics. He's a practicing Roman Catholic and has co-taught for over 15 years a course called A Culture of Science and Faith. Stephen Wepner will join me for this Q&A session. Okay.
Hello all. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Yes, Shaina, we may go ahead with questions if you have them.
I don't see any right now.
Wimla, you might just want to.
Sure. So so I do see a question from Mr. Ashok Thomas. Robin, thank you for this opening and look forward to all future sessions. I'm curious as to, sorry. Okay, Shaina, can you take over from here? I think it.
Okay, so
yeah,
Ashok was just asking, Robin, thank you for this opening and look forward to all the future sessions. I'm curious as to the conviction or frustration that led to this book.
Okay, wonderful question. I mean, a nice way to get started. I might be somewhat long-winded with it, but I promise to give you content. Sometime in late 2016, on our regular winter escape to Goa, Auntie Therese, sorry, I'm not talking to Shaina anymore. Teresa, my wife, decided to carry the book, The Language of God, in her valise. Let's read it, she said, while on holiday. So she said, that's what she said. So when in Goa, I picked it up and began to read. And Stephen Wepner was there as well at Ivan and Ingrid's home. And he and I got talking about Francis Collins, the scientist who wrote the book. Dr. Collins was head of the Genome Project, and sequencing the human genome represented the beginning of a new approach to the analysis of human disease. The book impressed me, and I went on to delve deeper into that part of science that was connected with the origins of the universe and of life. So I picked up Darwin's Origin of Species and realized he wasn't talking about origins, but was talking about the evolution of life. He acknowledged the creator as the one who breathed into an elemental atom. Then I turned to Dr. Gerald Schroeder, whose book, The Hidden Face of God, and I realized that Stanley Miller's experiment with amino acids was one long study in failure. I read Sir Fred Hoyle, a British astronomer, who outright rejected the Big Bang theory and referred to the notion that the operating program of a living cell could be arrived at by chance in a primordial soup as nonsense of a high order. And I said to myself, I need to put all of this together and bring my own conversation to the table. That the conversation about God is not about science or math. It's a theological one, a quest of the soul of man. If science could prove or disprove God, would we worship him? Do we worship the force of gravity? In the summer of 2017, I chatted late into the night with Stephen Wepner again at Andrea's home in Hamilton. And he said to me, Robin, I'm interested. So that's what brought out the book, Ashok.
Thank you.
So there's another question. I'm going to propose the hypothesis that when science does not have a finite answer for an event or incident, the fallback for most is the phenomenon called God. I would like you to debunk this hypothesis.
Can you read out the question again for me, please, Shaina?
Okay. So it starts, I am going to propose the hypothesis that when science does not have a finite answer For an event or incident, the fallback for most is the phenomenon called God. I would like you to debunk this hypothesis.
No, the fact remains that science cannot prove or disprove God. Why? Because science cannot see him. In a scriptural text, we're told that he tells Moses that I will pass you by and you will see my goodness, but you will never see me and live. So science has up to now, we've come up with theories of how life began with the Big Bang. We've come up with theories about how an elemental atom has developed into an organism, okay, and then thus leading to the creation of people like you and me. But they remain theories, because to think that the intellect of man, his emotions, his sense of love, and all of the complexities of the human body couldn't have come or couldn't have developed in a primordial ocean. Okay, so I just think I should leave this at that, and as the answer to this.
Can I give it a try? This hypothesis is a famous God of the gaps hypothesis. And I would argue that for every question that science answers, it asks 5 more. That's one thing. Also, I would argue that science has pushed theology to become more complex. That's true. But I would argue that our theology now is a much better theology because of science. And both theology and science are human endeavors inspired by our God. So.
Thank you, Stephen.
That was fantastic. I have another question. Shaina and I are going to be sharing this because I'm not very good with technology, but Shaina is the best. So I have another one here that says from Premila, I do not have a question, but I would like to read out from Michael Talbot's book, Mysticism and the New Physics. So Premila, are you around? You could go ahead and read. I've unmuted you.
Yeah, it's actually my father that wants to read over my laptop. Mr. Naz.
Okay, sure. That's fantastic. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. I would like to congratulate Robin on the great study that he has made on this particular subject. But I would like to comment that all the names that he has mentioned seem to be Western thinkers. He has not referred to the Indian and the Chinese tradition, which is very important because these questions have been dealt with in India many centuries before Christ. In fact, the basic thought in Indian philosophy and theology is just 3 words, Tat Tvam Asi, which means thou art that. And the entire philosophy of Shankara, which is called Advaita, is based on these 3 words, thou art that. It means really that the creator is part of his whole creation, that what we call the soul within us, in fact, is the spirit, the cosmic spirit. And God is not in human form as is normally presented in Western art. He is the universal, the cosmic energy which pervades the whole universe, and all that you see is a manifestation of that energy. The problem with Western science has always been they have dealt, with matter as and atoms. This is where I would like to read this little extract from Michael Talbot's Mysticism and the New Physics, in which he writes, since the time of the ancient Greeks, Western science has tried to understand matter by dividing and redividing it in efforts to discover its fundamental building blocks. Einstein brought us closer to figuring out the fundamental building blocks of matter when he discovered that the primordial substance of the universe is not matter but waves, particles, and quanta. In other words, energy in various minute forms. This, in fact, is what Advaita is all about. And then he goes on to say, the Hindu concepts of nada and bindu are identical to the concept of matter being both a wave and a particle. Translated roughly, nada means movement or vibration. Bindu literally means a point, and according to Hindu belief, when the universe finally collapses, it collapses in what is known as the Shiva Bindu. This bears striking similarity to modern physics. The macrophysical black hole and the Shiva Bindu are identical. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Nazareth, thank you for coming in and sharing those thoughts. I'm honored to see you here. Let my friends know that Pascal Alan Nazareth has been India's ambassador at several countries in the past. And Mr. Nazareth has, in fact, introduced me to a passage from Swami Vivekananda. And I'll just briefly read that. In an address that he delivered at Benares Hindu University in January 2001, he quoted Swami Vivekananda on what religion actually is. Religion is not talk, not doctrine, nor theories, nor is it sectarianism. Religion does not consist in erecting temples or building churches or attending public worship. It is the relationship between the individual soul and God. It is not to be found in books or in words or in lectures or in organizations. Religion consists in realization. Yeah. In fact, mysticism is the very meat and bones of what I bring to the table on Science and God. Yes. And thank you for that, Mr. Nazar.
Okay, we have another question from Golda Arthur. Hi, I have a question that I've been meaning to ask for 2 years. What did you find most challenging about writing this book?
Yes, most challenging was to be able to go back to a field of study that was not my forte at university. I am not a man of science, but I am a keen reader, and I think I was able to comprehend what science was putting out there, and which the modern atheist was picking up to use it for the wrong reasons. And I saw, talking to different people, that they were all voicing views of the modern atheist at the altar of science that do not stand the test of the truth. And so that was most challenging, getting to understand the scientific viewpoint on the basic two questions about how did the universe begin and how did life begin. And that was the big challenge.
Thank you, Uncle Robin. So there's another question from Mark. From the research that you have done for this book and from others, in what ways are science and God complementary or contradictory?
Oh, they are not contradictory.
Okay.
Let me read you something, Mark. Let me read you one where I basically answer the question. Religion and science are two different and complementary avenues to knowledge and truth. Science aims for an explanation of how things work, but religion, for the most part, aims at trying to understand the meaning and ultimate purpose of life. Methodologically, explanation and understanding function differently, but have a lot to learn from each other. Okay, so this book demonstrates that the so-called conflict between science and religion is fundamentally misconceived. Seen in their proper complementarity, They jointly illumine life's mystery and many conundrums. And let me quote from Einstein. He said, science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. So you can see there's complementarity in these two forms of study.
I think Uncle Ivan had wanted to say something. Uncle?
Yeah, we can unmute. Whoever wants to speak and is not comfortable with putting it on the chat, just raise your hand. There's a little icon at the bottom, or we can maybe unmute everyone right now. So where's Uncle Ivan? Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Robin and Steve, I think
Uncle Ivan,
really
can't.
done a great job in
He's cutting off.
It's echoing. So do you have two devices on where you are? Because there's an echo when you speak, like it's cutting up a little bit.
Have you two devices on, Ivan?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, you want to try one time?
Right now again? Can you hear me okay?
Now it's better.
What's that?
Better.
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just want to begin by complimenting both Robin and Steve. Steve, that's an excellent forward, and Robin, that was really a very scholarly study of the subject. I must say that after reading everything about science and God, if you're looking for a kind of real proof of the existence of God, you cannot find it in religion or science. You find it in experience. And I think the part in your book that really tells you or really proves of the existence of God is experience. Experience is the only proof, I think, of God. I believe, for instance, Robin, you could write another book which is entitled not Science and the God Elusion, but Theology and the God Elusion. Because while science can neither prove or disprove the existence of God, I think even the study of God itself cannot prove the existence or the non-existence of God.
Yes, Ivan. Very frankly, that, as I say, falls into chapter 6, which is the meat and bones of what I contribute to the conversation on science and God. And mysticism, I mean, is the soul's pursuit to see God, and that is what it is, and which is why those. Science, yes, can tell you what it is. Even what it says today cannot be ascertained for the truth, simply because there could be a piece of data that has been enshrouded in the past, or a piece of data that has still not been encountered that could change the paradigm. And which is why science can never be absolutely certain of its doctrine.
Thank you, Uncle Robin.
No, in fact, saying.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Uncle Ivan. Uncle Ivan, you can go ahead. It's not on mute. We can't hear you though. So,
yeah, I'm saying, for instance, experience like, problem real experiences like suffering, like some kind of revelation, suffering.
It's we can't.
Experiences like suffering, like some kind of revelation.
I don't want to take it away from Uncle Robin, but I just want to add to that statement you made about experience being the only proof of God. So what happens when times when we don't have that experience? What happens when you know you're in periods of desolation and you don't feel that consolation from God and that experience from God? What else is there that keeps you believing in the midst of suffering that there is a God? Right? So I feel like it's a little bit of both. It cannot only, in my humble opinion, it cannot only be experience, because there are some times when I don't feel close to God at all. I feel like he's just abandoned me. What brings me back to the faith that yes, there is a God and he's always there for me, and this is his plan, and he knows best. So I don't know if I can just go with just, for myself personally, just based on experience. Sorry, that was my 2 penny bit. That's
No, not two. It's not 2 penny bit.
2 paisa bit.
Yes, no, but these are complex questions.
Yeah.
The fact is, I have seen people. My wife Teresa has been one great example in my life. When she was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, I broke down in tears in a private moment. But I could see the strength with which she took it all. And I knew it was coming from her own personal faith, which said that she trusts and she submits. I mean, she was saying, you know, Lord, if it's the time you want me into your kingdom, here I am. And yet, she did not lose her sense of humor. She was bright and sprightly and all of that, knowing that he goes before her. And so, yes, how do you react to that experience? The Bible tells you the story of Job.
Yeah.
Okay. And in my own book, in chapter 6, I narrate the experiences of people like Thomas Merton, what's his name, Mike McHargue, who Mike McHargue talks of how he saw God coming to him on the waves while he was on a beach at late in the night, 3 in the morning. And let me read you, just a little of what he says here. And just give me another few seconds. Mike McHargue, in his book, Finding God in the Waves, narrates his departure from Christianity and how he was able to come back to it through science. As I stood on the beach in the wee hours of the morning, everything in my surroundings took on that stretched, translucent quality. I could see what I can only call the glory of God on the other side. I felt God with me, in me and through me. I felt connected with the source of life and the source of all. After it was over, I understood why someone would feel compelled to write about a bush that burned but was not consumed, or a blinding light on the road to Damascus, or an angel telling a 14-year-old virgin girl she was pregnant with the Son of God. So we have 10 minutes and there are more questions.
So there are a couple more, but I'm just being really mindful of people's time. So this was meant to be a 1-hour session, and you're most welcome to join the next ones. And and continue with this very important discussion. I'm so bad with my glasses. I see a couple. Let me see. Shaina, do you want to take any of them that are?
Yeah, I can read one. So,
Thanks.
Dad, Ren, says natural selection seems to eliminate the role of God in creating the various species of life. Do you have a comment on that?
Stephen, or was it Veer?
That was Veer. I sent Stephen.
Yeah. Shaina, please do me a favor and read that again. I need to absorb it clearly.
Sure. So he says natural selection seems to eliminate the role of God in creating the various species of life. Would you like to comment on that?
I don't think natural selection seems to eliminate the argument of God's presence, because as I said, natural selection isn't speaking of the origin of life. It's speaking about the evolution of life. And therefore, evolution is not in conflict with what we know of God's, presence on earth. No. Pope, was it John Paul? Or no, was it Pope Francis, I think, who had said, look, I mean, there is no conflict between the theory of evolution or the Big Bang and what the Christian Bible has to say about creation. So I don't really think natural selection really eliminates God, because it does not speak of its origin. It speaks only of its evolution. And if evolution was God's way of letting life advance, why not?
So there's another question from Roxana. We'll take a couple more questions and then we have 5 minutes, I guess. Are there any areas in which science and religion can work together? For example, in the fields of mental health, culture, in social justice.
Oh yes, I suppose there are countless ways where science and religion can work together. I mean, because I think what religion brings together is a sense of compassion, okay? A sense of compassion that reaches out to suffering across the world. Science can bring technology to simplify those tasks, and so that working together, we work towards a greater world, a better world. So there you are, Ruxa. Was that response anyway satisfying? Okay.
Perfect. So, are there any more questions? I guess you could unmute yourself and ask it rather than go through the chat, because there's so many questions or comments on the chat. It's difficult to kind of go through them. So
correct. Vipula, may I just add
yeah?
that if you're not able to address them, since we are closing into 1 o'clock, those wanting to send out a question could send it out with their email address to me, and I promise to respond. My email address is probably on all of the promo materials. Otherwise, it's robinauthor@hotmail.com.
And we can post it on the chat as well.
As well, and I could address them. I could send back responses to their email addresses.
Perfect. Thank you, Uncle.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, I think there was one from Masoom. Right? Masoom?
Do you want to read Masoom's, Shaina, please? I'll just type out the email address.
So Masoom says, thank you, Robin, for the great start. I am full of questions, but I'm going to wait till a couple more sessions. Today itself increased my knowledge in spite of having read some parts you spoke of. I think this one-to-one way of sharing your book is wonderful. So I guess it was just a comment.
Oh, thank you, Masoom.
But Ashok has another question.
Okay.
Within my limited knowledge of the Bible, It appears that the instances of God speaking or appearing to us reduces after the crucifixion and resurrection. Can you comment on what you came across during the research on this book?
I have not looked at this side of the experience, but what I get from Ashok's statement is that he doesn't see a connection between the Old and the New Testament. Whereas no, I think the New Testament, essentially, I mean, the coming of Jesus and his suffering and death was all foretold in the Old Testament, starting with Isaiah and the others. I am not, an expert on the Bible, not a theologian, but I don't know. Andrea, are you in there, and do you want to comment on this?
You'll have to just unmute yourself.
Yes. Robin, I'm sorry. I just took a little walk to China, so I missed out on what was said here.
Let China ask China or request China to read it out to you again.
Okay, so I'll read it again. Within my limited knowledge of the Bible, it appears that the instances of God speaking or appearing to us reduces after the crucifixion and resurrection. Can you comment on what you came across during the research of this book?
Yeah, and so what did you say, Robin?
Oh, well, I talked of, we see the connection between the old and the new, a continuation of God's plan, moving in, with the arrival of Jesus, his crucifixion and death and resurrection. So I don't think one has, outplayed the other.
No, yeah, there are clear connections of what happens before and after, that is the Old and the New Testament, in whatever little that I know. But I don't think God has really stopped speaking to us. He still does. Joel 2 also says that he sends us messages in visions and dreams. So I don't think it has really stopped. It's just that we don't hear from him as much because we are not tuned to him like the prophets were. I don't know if that's what he was asking.
That is exactly.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I believe that he talks to us all the time. All the time. If we are listening, he talks to us more than what you would see in scripture. In every little situation, he's talking to us. But we've got to be silent enough to listen to him, because when you yearn for him as much as he yearns for you, you will hear him speak.
Okay.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
All right, so Glennis?
At this point of time, I want to just hand it over to you, Vimla, before I close the call, just because you are the initiator and the inspiration for these sessions. So if you want to tell us why you thought this was a good time and what inspired you to organize this.
Glennis, you're putting me on the spot, but I
have to give you credit for this whole thing.
No. When Uncle Robin wrote this book, I have 3 children who always question. They always have a science, they look at life through the lens of science, right? I look at life through the lens of eternity. And so in Uncle Robin's book, I would love to understand it, but it is so heavy and so it's way beyond my scope. So my idea of bringing this up was so that he could do a one-on-one for dummies. Like, you get those books for dummies, computers for dummies, PowerPoint for dummies. So I thought this would be like, I'll explain it to you on Zoom. So you can ask all the questions you have and it'll be at your level, but it's still like a little above my level. I really am very, very interested in this topic, mainly because I feel close to God, and I know my kids do as well. Although their belief system may not be exactly like mine, and I don't want them to adopt my beliefs. They need to have their own. And so there's a balance between grace and a desire to get answers for yourself, right? So there's that balance of grace from God, I think, and wanting to know more about His Word. And that's how I asked Uncle Robin to come up with this Zoom presentation to make the book a little easier for dummies like me. But he did promise me that it gets easier as the chapters as you go along. It's the first couple of chapters are really heavy, and yeah. Thank you, Uncle Robin. Thanks.
And no, I just want to say that this could not have been possible, firstly, without you convening this, and then putting together this team with Glynis, who's hosting it, with Shaina, who is assisting you in moderating it, Aaron, who is behind it, graphics and technology, and then, of course, my dear wife, as always, with her inspiration. Have I missed out on anybody?
Aaron putting up with all the dumb questions that I ask, all the silly questions, right, Aaron? Couldn't see him, but
the book gets easier after the 4th chapter.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It's from the 4th chapter onwards. The first first chapters are very heavy. The 3rd is okay. And then from the 4th, it's fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. If I may say one thing before you end.
Sure.
As Ivan said, those who know God believe in Him because He exists in their hearts. Those who don't know God will not be convinced till they encounter Him personally.
That's why even
no science can actually. I don't think science can ever prove or disprove.
Yeah.
I believe God has created us because He wanted to have some communication with man. He loves man, and as much as He loves man, when one man begins to love Him, he begins to, experience Him.
So
good. Yeah.
Anyway, I want to close this because I want to respect everybody's time, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found this study valuable, and we look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Please spread the word because this is a very important subject. And with that, I want to wish you all a wonderful Saturday and the wonderful rest of your weekend. God bless you all.